This passage is about different ways of thinking about events and phenomena. Let's quickly summarize the passage and then discuss the questions. Isaiah Berlin understood the parable of the fox and the hedgehog. The fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing to illustrate two styles of thinking. So, Isaiah Berlin used the parable of the fox and the hedgehog to illustrate two different ways of thinking. What is the hedgehog? Hedgehogs relate everything to a single vision, a universally applicable organizing principle for understanding the world. This is what the hedgehog does. What do foxes do? They embrace many values and approaches rather than trying to fit everything into one singular vision. Debates about economic globalization are often dominated by hedgehogs. So, when you talk of economic globalization, the dominating players are the hedgehogs, or the hedgehog way of thinking is dominant. Actors who interpret and evaluate the dynamics and consequences of globalization through a single lens. Then he gives the example. Take the narrative that dominated the debate about globalization in the West from the collapse of the Soviet Union until the global financial crisis of 2008. It was the prevalent view was from a single perspective, single lens of the hedgehogs. On this view, and according to this hedgehog view, economic liberalization promised to grow the pie so that everyone, developed and developing countries, rich and poor, would be better off. So, economic liberalization would be good for everyone. This is what the hedgehog view was from the end of the Cold War, collapse of the Soviet Union until 2008. The confident perspective touted free trade as a win win outcome that would create peace and prosperity for all. In recent years, this view that economic liberalization is the greatest thing on earth, it is good for all, has been challenged by a variety of narratives that stress that economic globalization produces many losers as well. Right wing populists lament the decay of America's Rust Belt, warning of the need to protect the native working class against the offshoring of manufacturing jobs and the onshoring of immigrants. So, right wing proponents are against outsourcing of jobs and against immigration. Left wing populists and critics of corporate power protest that globalization's advantages often accrue mainly to the rich and the powerful multinationals, hollowing out the middle class. So, one globalization is opposed by the right wing for different reasons and for the left wing for different reasons. The COVID-19 pandemic and the climate crisis have heightened anxiety about the resilience and the sustainability of our economies. We are now at a critical juncture. A relatively longer period of stability in mainstream thinking about economic globalization has given way to a situation of dramatic flux. So, after a stable, um, long period of stability, where our views on economic globalization were also rather stable, we have now come to a situation of flux, ever changing situation. During such periods, narratives assume particular relevance. So, when you are in a period of flux, when nothing is stable, everything is changing, narratives become very important. The way you look at things. Why? Because they offer new ways for actors to understand what the problem is and what should be done. So, people know when you have different narratives, people understand the problem. They get a clarity about a problem and also clarity about what should be done about it. The interplay of different narratives could be the starting point of a nuanced appraisal of the complexities, uncertainties, and ambiguities of economic globalization. More often, debates about, however, so when you have a nuanced approach, you can kind of understand the complexity of economic globalization, uncertainty, ambiguity. It's not a very simple thing that you say it works for everybody. However, debate about economic globalization devolve into standoff. They always get reduced into standoffs. Two parties, loggerheads, there's no movement ahead. among hedgehogs who emphasize the validity of their perspective while seeking to expose their opponents as economically illiterate. So I have a point of view, I push my point of view forward, you raise an opposing point of view, and I say you know nothing. So what do hedgehogs do? They put their point forward and they look at their opponent views as something just expressed by somebody who's economically illiterate, politically dangerous, or morally bankrupt. They use these terms to brush away any counter argument to their views. A prime example of such a standoff was the reaction by established figures to the critique of free trade and immigration that animated Trump's presidential campaign and the Brexit movement in the United Kingdom. So, this standoff, from the kind of debates that happened during Trump's presidency campaign and the Brexit movement. This is what the passage is all about. Hedgehog way of thinking, Fox way of thinking about economic globalization. Hedgehog way of thinking, economic globalization is good, it's good for everybody. But now the people are countering. We have come to a state when we realize different perspectives help us to look at it, and the point now is it's not necessarily good for everybody. It has resulted in a lot of people, lot of losers as well. Hedgehog debate on the issue results in standoffs, and in this standoffs you only push your way forward, and the opponent's view is seen as something which is politically dangerous, morally wrong, and economically also incorrect. All right. Slightly tough passage. Let's quickly look at it. All the following inferences can be drawn from the given from the information given in the passage, except three options can be inferred from the passage. Which option cannot be inferred? That's a right answer. Economic globalization is a complex topic that is best discussed using a single perspective. Did the author claim that the hedgehog has the right view when you read the passage? What is the opinion you got? Hedgehog way of thinking, fox way of thinking. Until now, hedgehog way of thinking dominated. But now people are realizing that that is wrong. Economic liberalization is good for everybody. Globalization is good for everybody. You realize that is wrong. Looking at it from a single lens looking at it from different perspectives helps you understand a problem better and helps you deal with it better. So the author seems to be will not agree with the hedgehog way of thinking. So definitely he will not agree that it should be looked at from a single perspective. All right, so this cannot be inferred from the passage. Let's quickly look at B, C, and D. The dominant narrative of economic liberalization has been challenged in recent years by perspectives highlighting the negative effects of globalization. True, COVID-19 pandemic have increased concern about the sustainability of economies. Yes, has been mentioned. Debates have often devolved into standoffs between different perspectives. So A is not true according to the passage. B, C, and D have been mentioned. So the correct answer is A. Which of the following, if true, would weaken the argument of the proponents about free trade resulting in a win-win outcome for all? So people who promote free trade say it's, or globalization, economic globalization say that free trade, globalization would result in a win-win situation for all. So how would you weaken it? Find an option which is not a win-win situation for all, which is win for some, lose for some. Win for one, lose for one. The World Bank has found economic liberalization has increased the middle class from 23 of the world population to 43% in the last 3 decades. Now, this shows that the benefits to the middle class globally. So, it's not going to weaken. It didn't say anything about who lost out. It just says that. So, when we talking about win-win outcome for all, the win-win outcome was in terms of win-win outcome for both the developed and developing countries. Now here he has talked about middle class across the world. That means it includes developed and developing countries. Here the all stands for all countries, developed and developing. When you're talking of middle class all over the world, it's a class of people. So even in the middle class in developed countries and developing countries benefited. So this would not weaken the author's argument. Second one, an analysis done by IMF found that economic globalization has led to a decrease in poverty and inequality globally. So that's a win-win situation. Decrease in poverty across the globe. Win-win for everybody. A survey by the Rand Corporation of Business Leaders found that free trade agreements have led to economic growth and job creation in developed countries. It hasn't said anything about developing countries. The Rand found that the growth happened in developed countries. So this will weaken, though it has not said anything about developing countries, it shows that the benefits have accrued to only one section, the developed countries. So looks like a good option to weaken my argument. Let's look at option D. A study by Peterson Institute for International Economics demonstrates that economic globalization has led to improved living standards for more than 400 million people. Now, here we do not know the breakup of this 400 million people. So we assume that these 400 million people are spread across developed and developing countries. So among the four options, the one that weakens the benefit for all developed and developing countries is only C, because here the benefit has accrued only to the richer countries. Therefore, the correct answer is C. Which of the following options, if true, will make the idea that free trade is beneficial for all more believable? Strengthen the idea that free trade will benefit all. So look for an option which says it resulted in benefits for both developed and developing countries, benefit for all. Even if it says only developing countries would be benefit for all, because developed countries anyway are rich. But let's look at what the options give us. According to a report by the WTO, global trade has grown to an annual average rate of 4.9%. Where has it increased? Has it increased? Global trade has increased, could have increased only in one part. So I'm not sure. Here I'm assuming it's everybody, but I'm not very sure if this is necessarily. The trade has increased, but has it improved the lot of the people? Right? Not sure. It could have only helped particular section or a particular section of developed countries or developing. I'm not sure. The International Monetary Fund states that countries that are more open to trade have higher per capita income, while per capita help individuals. So trade is good for us. That doesn't in any way support how free trade will benefit all. And this is not about free trade. Country open to trade are generally better off. Study by the Peterson Institute found that North American Free Trade Agreement between US, Canada and Mexico increased the average US household. This is not for all. This is only free trade between these three countries which has helped the US. According to the World Bank, countries that are more open to trade have experienced faster economic growth and poverty reduction. All right. If left like that, it would have been vague, but here, between 1990 and 2019, the number of people living in extreme poverty fell from 36 to 8.9 globally. Therefore, that's my answer. Globally, poverty decreased. What about C? C helped only US. Why not B? That's a general statement. Therefore, D is my correct answer. All right, last question, slightly tough. Which of the following, whenever I see options which are 4 lines long, I'm a little worried. Which of the following options resembles the logical structure of the passage the most? Now, let's quickly think of the logical structure of the passage. 2 ways of thinking, foxes and hedgehogs. Foxes, single lens, hedgehogs, single lens, single perspective, one underlying principle applying to all. Hedgehogs take in different perspectives. Correct? That's the main one. And again, the example in the passage, the structure of the passage talked of one phenomenon only, economic globalization. Correct? Hedgehog said it benefited everybody. Foxes said it didn't, and they're trying to now that it resulted in some losers as well. So this is roughly what we're looking at. There's an ongoing debate about TPP in India where proponents of the agreement agree that it would create jobs, promote economic growth, while opponents hurt common workers. So this is just two sides of a debate. There is no single lens and various perspectives. Not sure. Debate about Brexit, one point, other point of view. Again, single lens, various perspectives. Debate and argument about it. Pros and cons. Debate about immigration in the United States, where some argue it's necessary, others burden on resources. Again, pros and cons of one issue. Debate about climate change, where some argue it's a pressing problem that requires immediate action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The other argue that science is uncertain and taking action would be too costly. Single lens, first one. One, the phenomenon is global, while the other three is local. Second, here this is dangerous, therefore act against it. Second one, no, there is ambiguity and this will be too costly, so they're taking different perspective. Not just environmental damage, but also taking the cost into account. If we counter it, cost will become too much. Is it viable? So single lens versus various perspective on a global phenomenon. Therefore, the one that is most analogous to the structure of the passage is D.